Thank you all for watching and supporting my videos. Your encouragement keeps me inspired to create even more content. My next big goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers, and I can't do it without your help. If you enjoy what I create, hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey. Now let's dive into the stories. Tom sat in the dark corner of his room, curled up in a blanket. He usually wasn't like this, but after the breakup with Maria, these evenings had become harder. Nothing interested him. His gaze wandered across the walls, his eyes squinting from the dim light of the lamp flickering on the table. The wind howling outside only amplified the feeling of loneliness that spread across the room. Tom glanced at the clock. Midnight? This time of night always made his thoughts drift back to the past, pulling him to the moments when he and Maria were together. It still felt heavy, like there was something stuck in his throat that he couldn't get rid of. But he tried to move on to beat that feeling. Tom reached for his phone, scrolling through messages. The last ones from Maria were just a few days before their breakup. He sighed and turned off the screen. And at that moment his phone suddenly lit up. A call. An unknown number. He picked up. Tom, hello. Maria, hi, it's me. Her voice on the other end was low and soothing. At first, nothing seemed off until strange yet familiar tones began to emerge. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. Tom, Maria, what do you want? It's late. Maria, just to talk. She didn't say anything more. Just that terrifying silence that froze his heart. She was far away, but he felt something was wrong. Now wasn't the time for emotions. Something in her voice made him realize this wasn't just a call. It was a signal. Tom immediately hung up. His hand trembled. What did she want? He checked his phone again, almost hoping it was a prank. But the next call from Maria came immediately. Maria, you can't escape. Tom felt his heart stop. He stared at the screen, unable to believe his eyes. This was more than just a call. It was a threat or something much worse. He quickly turned off his phone and got up from the couch. The knocking at the door, which at first seemed like a random sound, now felt like a signal. His fists clenched and a few fleeting thoughts crossed his mind. It couldn't be a coincidence. He slowly got up and approached the door. Another knock. Was it really her? Tom couldn't believe Maria would come here in the middle of the night, but the feeling seemed so real. His hand gripped the doorknob, but he didn't open it. Tom, who's there? Nothing. Just silence. The knocking stopped. Tom stood in the dark, his heart pounding louder. He felt the emptiness fill the room. The door remained locked, and he started to realize that something was very wrong. Suddenly the phone rang again. This time she didn't speak, just dialed. Not once but several times. As if demanding his attention. Maria? Tom opened the door. Tom moved to the window, pulled back the curtains, and looked out at the yard. The night was silent, only the wind and darkness. He decided to check again. He stepped away from the window and suddenly, there was another sound, knocking from inside the house. Tom spun around sharply, nervously. Tom, what was that? He began to move through the house, checking every room, every corner. What could be so strange that made his heart race so fast? He walked down the hallway where his footsteps echoed too loudly. The windows were shut, the doors were in place, no movement outside. But the feeling that he wasn't alone only grew stronger. A few minutes later, he stood in front of an old mirror in the hallway when his phone rang again. He looked at the screen. Maria. His hand trembled as he picked up the receiver. Maria, you won't be able to escape, Tom. He felt his heart squeeze in his chest. Something wasn't right. Something deeper. Another knock. Now he was almost certain it was Maria. But had he gone too far? What did she want from him? Knocking. Again. And again. Like footsteps approaching. Tom tried to convince himself it was all in his head. But if it was, why was his heart beating so hard? He stepped away from the mirror and jerked open the door, turning his head over his shoulder. Now he heard her voice again, but it sounded like she was right behind him. Maria, you don't know what you've done. Tom turned around, but this time he didn't see her. Night engulfed him again in its dark emptiness. Tom, filled with fear, tries to find answers to what is happening, but each step feels wrong. All exits are locked, the windows secured, and there's no sound in the house. He tries to calm himself, telling himself it's just his nerves, but he can't shake the feeling that someone is watching him. Tom approaches the living room where an old television sits. Everything seems normal at first, but the longer he looks at it, the more uneasy he feels. The image on the screen starts off fine, but suddenly flickers and strange geometric shapes begin to appear. The TV shuts off and once again Tom's phone rings. "Maria, you still don't understand, Tom? You couldn't have forgotten." Tom swallows coldly. This voice doesn't sound like the one he's used to hearing. It carries something merciless. It seems like he's lost his mind, or maybe this is really happening. He checks the doors again, but now he feels trapped. He doesn't know who or what is behind these sounds, but this is clearly no ordinary breakup. Just when he tries to climb out the window, a sinister, invisible presence suddenly appears. A chill sweeps over his body. He feels touches on his back and then he hears the familiar voice whispering his name. "Maria, Tom." Tom turns around and her figure appears before him. She stands there as if emerging from the darkness, but her eyes, empty, dark and merciless, look lifeless. "Tom, what are you doing here? You're not real." But Maria moves closer and a horrifying laugh escapes her lips. Tom begins to panic. His breathing becomes labored and his mind grows more blocked by fear. He tries to figure out how to escape, but each movement feels like a trap. He looks around and notices the air stirring in the darkness. Suddenly he feels something like a hand gripping him from behind and he can't move. "Tom, what do you want from me?" "Maria, you didn't do anything. You don't understand, Tom." Tom feels Maria's hands softly gripping his shoulders. She doesn't answer, only stares at him with an empty gaze. And then everything starts to darken. The moment when something entirely new, terrifying and undeniable appears. Tom tries to break free, and suddenly a black shadow opens before him, consuming everything around him. He screams again and this time his scream becomes part of something much larger. Steps in the darkness. The darkness deepens and Tom feels everything around him closing in. He can't find an exit, he can't move because every step feels so heavy, it's as though his mind is consumed by hellish fear. Maria approaches. She stands right before him, the anger and coldness in her eyes becoming more intense. Her face grows more and more inscrutable, merging with the shadow. "Maria, you can't escape from what you've done." Tom feels her cold breath against his face. He feels her presence wrapping around him from all sides. "Tom, Maria. Are you dead?" Maria doesn't respond. In her eyes, emptiness. She just stands there staring at him. And then once again her voice, familiar yet foreign at the same time. "Maria, you couldn't understand me, Tom. I loved you. And you destroyed it." At that moment the room begins to spin, blurring the surrounding reality, and Tom feels his reality merging with another, darker one. He can't tear his gaze from her face. His heart pounds so fiercely that it feels like it's going to explode. And then the darkness consumes everything. The world becomes night once again. Tom wakes up. His eyes hurt from the bright light and his whole body aches. He doesn't remember how he ended up on the living room floor, but he feels like something is wrong. For a few seconds he tries to get his bearings, his breathing heavy and uneven. He gets up, looks around and realizes that the house once again looks like a familiar and safe place. Everything is calm. There's no dark shadow, no Maria. He wipes the sweat from his forehead and starts to think that maybe it was just a nightmare. Tom slowly moves toward the door and checks it, it's not locked. He opens it and steps outside. A few minutes pass and he tries to convince himself that it was just his fear, that he had been on edge due to loneliness. But as he approaches the car, something makes him turn back to the house. And there, right on the doorstep, he sees something that makes his heart stop. From one of the house's walls, a bloody message protrudes, "You can't escape, Tom." He freezes. Now he knows, everything that happened was real. And his nightmare is far from over. Tom turns back into the house, his heart racing, and starts searching for any way to escape. He knows he can't leave the house without answers. He begins rummaging through his bag and finds an old postcard Maria once sent him. It contained coordinates for a meeting he could never find. And on the back of the postcard is another note, now written at the very edge. "You still won't understand why I'm doing this, but I will never find peace anywhere else, so I'm coming for you. You can't escape from me, Tom." Tom begins to understand. This is not just revenge, it's part of something much bigger. They will be together again and this is no longer just mental terror. A few weeks later, when the police arrive at the scene, they find no signs of a struggle or evidence supporting an attack. The house looks as if nothing happened. But one of the officers walking past notices a strange mark on the wall, a black drawing, something he's seen before. It was the same message Tom had seen. After hours of investigation, they still find no answers. And when one of them tries to take another step, his hands freeze from the cold, and deep inside he feels something is waiting for him in the darkness. Tom and Maria will never appear again, and their story will remain a mystery that will never be solved. A dark evening. It's raining. The windows of the house reflect the street lights. The neighborhood is completely empty. Only the rhythmic sound of rain tapping against the windows breaks the silence. John is sitting on the couch, intently looking at the screen of his phone. He reads a message, replies to a text, and occasionally laughs to himself. Mickey is focused on his task. A table in front of him is scattered with pieces of a plastic airplane model that he's trying to assemble. He often refers to the instructions, carefully picking the parts. John, what's still gluing your airplane? Want to go out and play? It's the perfect time. Mickey, I can go because of the rain. And I'm trying to finish the model. I'll be ready for the weekend. John chuckles and returns to his phone, but his gaze keeps drifting back to his brother. He continues anxiously staring at the blank screen as if waiting for some news or a call. Meanwhile, Mickey, absorbed in his model, hums quietly. At this moment, the rain begins to intensify, and the sound of the wind hitting the windows grows louder. John sets his phone aside, walks to the window, and looks out at the yard. The outside looks gloomy and empty. The street is deserted, with only solitary streetlights flickering weakly in the background of the darkness. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the door breaks the silence. At first, John thinks it's a neighbor, but his surprised expression betrays his uncertainty. Dialogue, Mickey, do you hear that? Someone's knocking. John, don't worry. It's probably someone from the neighbors. They wouldn't knock any other way. John pauses for a moment, staring at the door, but then walks over to it. He peeks through the peephole but sees nothing. The window only reflects the heavy downpour, and there are no signs of anyone outside. Dialogue, John, it's fine. There's nothing there. Mickey doesn't respond, but his eyes remain watchful. He presses his model down harder on the table, his fingers visibly trembling. John returns to the couch and picks up his phone but can't shake the feeling that something's not right. The rain sounds start to feel unusual. They're too intense, almost like the pressure in the atmosphere is building, and the wind seems to hum low notes. Dialogue, Mickey, John, why is it so noisy in the basement? John, probably just the old pipes or something. Don't worry about it. But his face reveals uncertainty. A loud noise, as if something heavy fell to the floor in the basement, echoes through the house. John puts his phone on the table and cautiously heads toward the stairs to look toward the basement. The strange noises from the basement continue. They fade, then return, sounding like something heavy scraping across the floor. Mickey remains sitting, increasingly nervous, his gaze locked on the basement door. Dialogue, Mickey, John, something's wrong. I heard it before. John pulls on the basement door but it won't open. There's another heavy sound, this time like something is being dragged across the old wooden floor. It seemed like the house was completely still just an hour ago, but now it's clear that something is in motion. Dialogue, John, it's just a bad noise. Maybe some old mechanism. But his words don't convince him. Mickey is trembling, watching his brother. He doesn't know what to think anymore. John swallows hard and, trying to suppress his fear, walks toward the basement. It's no longer just a noise, it sounds like real steps or screams, the kind of thing that's hard to mistake for random sounds in an old house. Dialogue, John, maybe I should check. It's probably nothing, right? But Mickey doesn't believe him. He sits frozen, watching his brother's every step. John stops by the basement door, a million thoughts racing through his mind. Every sound seems more real, more obvious. He places his hand on the door, but it opens immediately as if someone on the other side is pressing. Mickey, John, don't go there. Mom and Dad will be back soon. This can't be anything good. John glances at Mickey but without responding walks downstairs. The creaking sound of the stairs echoes in the silence. Step by step he descends further. The house has grown even quieter, and the shadow enveloping the hallway feels so thick it's almost tangible on his skin. In the basement there's dim light. Only a few lamps illuminate part of the space. John turns around and surveys the area. The air is dusty, and the strange energy of the basement is already starting to unsettle him. He tries to focus but suddenly hears a noise from around the corner. It sounds like something heavy being dragged across the floor. He freezes, listening as the sound gets closer. A dark figure, almost like a shape, moves in the shadow. John opens his mouth but no sound comes out. The surge of adrenaline paralyzes him. Dialogue: John, this can't be real. The shadow moves again. The feeling of unbearable fear overwhelms him, but he can't turn back. Suddenly, in the corner of the basement, he sees movement, something big and undefined. He approaches it and then hears a voice, very quiet, as if someone is speaking to him from the darkness. The shadow: I'm here. Are you looking for me? John pulls himself away from the spot, his heart pounding wildly. He can't believe what he just heard. His fingers slide along the wall, searching for an exit, but everything around him feels strange and foreign. Then suddenly something heavy falls from a shelf. Unexpectedly, the basement fills with a loud hum. John rushes back, but then, just to his misfortune, one of the old boxes falls and blocks his way out. All he sees ahead of him is a dark silhouette approaching. The same noise that came from the basement now sounds from a distance, and this someone is right near him. At the moment when John realizes he's helpless, a figure appears from around the corner. It's large, black, impenetrable to light. Holding his breath, John can't tell what it is, a person or something else. John, who are you? The figure moves closer and finally speaks words John can't understand. Its face remains hidden in the darkness, but one thing is clear: it's not human. It's something that can only be defined as a monster. Its eyes glow in the dark, and its movements are too fast and predatory. John rushes to the window and tries to escape through the narrow opening. His hands tremble, he feels the monster's gaze on him, but he manages to get out of the basement. Dialogue: John, Mickey, hide. Hurry. When John bursts into the room, he sees Mickey standing frozen in the hallway. His eyes are wide, his movements blocked by fear. John grabs his hand and pulls him back toward the window. Behind them, they hear someone moving up the stairs, getting closer. John crashes into the door, breaking it open as he heads toward the exit. But before them, the silhouette appears again. Is it the same monster? Or perhaps something new? John and Mickey stand, leaning against the door, their hearts pounding wildly in their chests. They hear the terrifying sound on the stairs again, footsteps. And they're getting closer. John, gripped by panic, can't think clearly. John, we won't make it. We won't get out of here. Mickey, whose sense of reason has long since faded, grips John's hand. He starts to sob but doesn't give up. In his younger brother's eyes, determination emerges. Not daring to run alone, he pulls the older one. Mickey, John, we have to do this. The exit, it's there behind the door. Do you hear? John glances at the door. They seem so weak and helpless, but it's their only hope to get out. He remembers when they played together in the yard, when everything was simpler. Now he doesn't know if he'll stay alive with his brother. And at that very moment, when they both stand on the edge of despair, suddenly from the left side of the hallway, there's the sharp sound of a door opening. It's hard to believe, but it's the door leading out of the house. It opened by itself. The door that seemed like it was never meant to open. Mickey grabs John's hand and they run. Their legs move frantically, rushing through corridors, past rooms, toward the final point, the exit from the house. Feels like just a few more seconds and it will be too late. But as they're almost at the threshold, suddenly there's a sound that fades deep within the dark house. It's not just footsteps, it's still that same monster. Right at the doorstep they hear something else, something much worse. And just as the door opens to the outside, John hears a voice. It's the monster. But its words are not about them. It says, "Monster, you want leave. I'm here. And this is my home." Leaving the question unanswered, the door closes and outside, silence. John and Mickey silently look at each other, their hearts racing. They don't know what just happened to them, but they're already outside. The house is behind them. Their escape seems like it was only the beginning of something even more terrifying. A few weeks have passed. John and Mickey continue living, but they can't forget what happened that night. They try to return to normal life. One day while walking through the neighborhood, they pass by the house they fled from. And what do they see? The same shadow. The same figure. It's still standing by the window. And they feel cold sweat running down their spines. But this time they don't try to run. They just keep walking, leaving behind that same house, which remains uncertain. What's next? They didn't know. The only thing that was certain: what happened that night would never leave their memories. The end.